concerning the Freedmans, we used to have a night. It was just down on the Maribyrnong River there. It was just like a mini casino. So I rang their number, just said I was Senior Sergeant Shepherd from Moonee Ponds. We're going to have to come in and close it down. It's not going to look good. I didn't realise how seriously they'd taken. They just grabbed all the games. They just threw it all in the river.
G'day sports fans and welcome to Quinny's Stablemates. Our very special guest today, a man that's trained all over the world and one of the great larrikins of Australian racing. A warm welcome to John Sadler.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here with you.
There are the formalities out of the way. Now we can start the banter throughout the course of the podcast. But we can't wait to have a chat today. We're going to talk about your training career. You've gone to the likes of Dubai, Singapore, and obviously done great things here in Australia. How did you get involved? Tell us about a young John Sadler.
Well, I grew up on a dairy farm. The last thing I ever wanted to do was milk cows, so I was looking for something else straight away, Nick. But I went to boarding school in Geelong, and I became quite friendly with the Burke family, who their father Pat Burke trained at Flemington, and went there on some school holidays and just loved it. And my father, not professionally, but he had a real love for horse racing as well. So we used to, head off down the road to the Camperdown races or Terang races or Mortlake or wherever it may have been. And, it got in my blood early, and I just loved it. I loved horses, but I loved actually the racing game just as much.
Now, what was in the milk that those cows were dishing out? Because your mum lived to 110 and your dad lived to 96. That is quite incredible.
It is. It must have been good stuff. I think it was all we pretty much ate off the land. So it was just all natural stuff. So, Dad used to have toast with his butter. And Mum cooked with a heap of salt, and she was a great cook. But killed their own sheep and grew their own, veggies, and fruit and whatnot. So it was a good, healthy life.
And they got right behind you as well, especially your mum. She was so sharp right to the end. We'll talk about your great career throughout this chat, and she was present for a lot of those big victories as well.
Yeah, she was. It was terrific. Actually, my sister, I've got four sisters. One of them, my younger sister, Helen, was extremely good to her, and pretty much took her around the world. One of those visits when Mum would have been very late 90s was to come and see me in Dubai, and I can remember for the week that they were there, I had a really good week, and Mum just loved it, really enjoyed it. And she was mad racing. I mean, she went the 3 days of the Warrnambool Carnival for years and years on end, some unbelievable amount of years, until she got a little bit too old. But she was not only a good woman, but a real character, and very strong in her opinions. And maybe I got a bit of that from her, but she lived a great life.
I love the fact that in her late 90s, she's going halfway around the world to Dubai. It's just sensational.
Yeah, just amazing. It was, and she was in very, very good health and really able to enjoy it, and not a burden on anybody at all. It wasn't until probably the last 12 or 18 months that she wasn't as good, and we just thank God now in hindsight that she went before COVID came along.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been challenging for anyone in that situation during that period of your life. So an absolute superstar she was. She would have taken so much pride in all your success. And tell us about how then you took the next step with the training career. You went from a bit of hands-on work, dipping your toe in it, to thinking, this is what I want to do for a living. Yeah,
well, I had about, I suppose, 8 years working for different trainers. The local trainer in Terang at the time was nearly every town had their local trainer, and at that time was Fred Drever. And probably not many people would remember, but he trained a very good horse called Grey Sapphire, and he was just unfortunate in his 3-year-old career that he ran into Manicato and Caraman, who were it was just a fantastic crop. But Fred was one of those trainers that did just about everything himself. Did their teeth, all the veterinary work he did himself, and just one of those really great old trainers.
Now, you've gone through that great apprenticeship and you start training in your own right. How hard were those early days, and how much did the punt come into what you'd have to do to survive?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up on the with racing when that's all it was about. It was only just about the punt. I can remember once again going to the races with my dad, and he had an interest in a horse that was racing there, and I said, "It's got any chance, Dad?" He said, no chance at all. And then I saw him go in to the ring and he had $5. I think it was dollars. It may have been pounds. And I said, "Well, what's going on here? Why would you be backing it? You just told me it's got no chance." He said, "I couldn't bear it if it just happened to get up and you weren't on it." It was like an embarrassment if you won and you hadn't backed them. It was just, that's what it was all about. So I grew up with that. It's changed a lot now, as you know, but that's what I grew up with. And there was always, nearly every race, there'd be a good story being told in the betting ring. Punters rushing from one bookmaker to the other to get the best price. So that's how I grew up in the game, where maybe you might have 3 winners. A big trainer might have a treble on the Saturday at Flemington, but the guy that had 1 winner and it was back from 20s into 5s, he was the hero of the day.
Now, what about when you went into your own training? Did you get a few horses early doors and a bit of the punt was the way to survive, or was it you get your first couple of horses and you cut your teeth with them? How did that come about?
Yeah, I started off very slowly. Just Dad gave me, had 1 or 2 horses and gave me a bit of a start. And I can remember taking, I think I took a couple. I started off pretty slow the first 6 months. I got my licence in 1978. So, and I can remember I only had 2 horses in work, and we took them to Coleraine on a Saturday. Just Dad and I went up, and they both saluted. And that sort of started to get the ball rolling just a little bit. But it wasn't until I moved. I was in Colac. I trained in Colac for 8 years. And I would say I trained from there probably in those 8 years. I might have trained 10 or 12 city winners, which is not that many over a long period of time. But when you're young and you're the new kid on the block, people are starting to take notice. I took pride in my horses always looking well. I got that from Bob Oysted. It was always important that your horses were well cared for, looked really well, and even clients in those days everybody went to the races, of course, Quinny, as you know, you don't have to today, but in those days everybody went. If you wanted to be there and if you wanted to have a bet, just a bet, you had to go. So, there was great interest in the mounting yard when horses were parading for people to have a look and see what they thought, and they'd say, "Oh, this guy's horses look well. He's a chance, this guy." But it probably wasn't until I got to Flemington, and it was a big punt, and moving from a place where I was, I'm not saying comfortable, but I'd won the last couple of premierships in the Southwest, and just leaving that all behind to go to Melbourne, where people basically didn't know you. So got the opportunity to train at Flemington, and then that was in '86, and things took off from there.
What was it like going to Flemington? As you said, 1986, and some of the biggest names in racing were based at headquarters.
They were. Well, you had obviously Bart Cummings, Colin Hayes, and the Freedmans just kicking off at the same time, and of course, their story is, a fantastic one. I still say today that I've seen a lot of good trainers, and worked beside a lot of good trainers. But I would say when he was on top of his game, which is hard to do for a long period of time, but when he was on top of his game during the late 80s, the 90s, and even the early 2000s, he's the best I've seen.
Lee Freedman?
Yeah, no doubt he's the best I've seen.
What would he do and what made him so great? What's the difference between him, as you've said, the greatest you've seen, and then the next bunch of really, really good trainers?
Well, I think to be a really good trainer, you've got to be extremely selfish. It's not that great a life for those around you because you've really got to be pretty self-centred. Lee was good at that, really good at it. And I used to call him Flinders Lane at one stage. He said, "What do you call me, Flinders Lane?" I said, "It's just one-way traffic with you." But they went on. And, of course, it was a unique situation where there was four of them. And they all, as time's gone by, that they've proved that they can all train extremely well in their own right. But they were halcyon days for that family. And I suppose when it all really, they were climbing the ladder rapidly, but when they quinelled the Melbourne Cup, I think it was 89, 88 or 89, was terrific and superimposed. And, they were really up and away then. While
we're talking about the Freedman family, tell us about your incident with them and the pokey machine.
Oh, yeah, I just look... Right from the time when I was a kid, I just loved a good belly laugh, and doing some awful things to people, but not that it would harm them in any great way. But I used to love scaring the crap out of them, and we used to have a night. It was just down on the Maribyrnong River. There, it was over the road from where I was stabled. Were their stables, and it was quite a community gathering that we'd get there on a Saturday night at their place, and it was just like a mini casino. And anyway, I decided that after we'd had, some good times and felt like causing a little bit of trouble, so I rang their number. Once again, this was before mobile phones, rang their number and just said I was Senior Sergeant Shepherd from Moonee Ponds. I'd followed the career closely and, very keen fan of racing. But we've got some fairly disturbing news that you're running a casino type of event on a Saturday evening there, and we're going to have to come in and close it down. It's not going to look good. So I suggest that you do whatever you can. I just wouldn't like to see you on the front page of the Sun on Monday morning. So they just went in. I didn't realise, how seriously they'd take it. But I was pretty good at putting a voice on. But anyway, they just grabbed all the games, the roulette table, blackjack, they just threw it all in the river. It's just amazing. I thought, I didn't realise it then. So I went down across, and I knocked on the door, and it was Richard that came to the door. He said, you'll never guess what's happened. I said, what's happened? He said, the cops. And, I said, I know. I said, I'm Senior Sergeant Shepherd. I can't repeat even among you guys what he said. But I said, let's get on with it. Let's play, you know. He said, it's all gone. The stuff's all gone. We threw it in the river. It still might be there, Nick. I don't know.
And the Freedman brothers, brilliant trainers, but probably not renowned for their sense of humour. How did they cop the gag?
Oh, no, not good. No, not good. Took a while for there was no talkies there for quite some time. Yeah.
All these years later, I wonder how they'd cop it if I brought it up.
No, they'd cop it fine now. They have finally recovered, but I can assure you at the time, Nick, it took them a long, long time to get over it.
That's very entertaining. Now, you as a trainer, you've been part of several Group 1 wins. You've been part of a Melbourne Cup victory, but I want to talk to you about a different cup, the Hamilton Cup in 1991, won by a horse called Prisman's Choice.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting time of my life. I haven't had a great deal of luck in the marriage stakes, Nick, and Peter Moody likes to tell me that I love wedding cake. The divorce left me in pretty ordinary financial position, and I'd just bought the stables at Flemington in Fisher Parade for a bit over $1 million, and look, I could go on and on and on how this happened, but all I had to my name was $5,000. So I've got to write a cheque out for $106,000 for the deposit. And I said, would you advance me the money? Will you lend me the money? He said, oh, geez, that's a lot of money, John. I said, I've got no problems. I said, I've got backers and it'll all be okay. It'll all be okay. He said, I'll fix it up on Monday. So, and I had no backers at all. I was just, anyway, I wrote out the cheque for $106,000 and they passed it. And then I got a few people to lend me a few bob to just cover that deposit. But then I sort of went into full swing about trying to borrow the money, get people to lend me the money, but none of it happened. None of it happened. So I thought, a guy said to me, what do you do best? And I said, well, obviously I think, you know, that I'm best at training and maybe being able to set a horse up. But he said, why don't you try and do that? And I didn't have a strong team, but I had a 2-year-old called Jack Pill, and this is in the very early 90s, and he was showing me a reasonable amount of promise, and the only other decent horse I had at the time was Prisman's Choice, who'd pretty much done his thing. I thought, well, I just haven't got enough to have to get out on just one bet. I'm just going to have to set the 2-year-old up, borrow a little bit of money. I had $5,000 myself, borrow another $5,000, and he went around at about, I think 9 or 10 to 1, and he won by 6 lengths with his head on his chest. And that was not exciting, but a relief, because I knew I still had a fair bit to go. And I thought my only other chance was to run my best horse in the worst race, as far as nothing against Hamilton Cup. There was a lot of great Hamilton Cups, you know, horse called Pura Maca, who won 4 of them, comes to mind. But that particular year it wasn't going to be a strong race, and I suppose I gave him a couple of runs where he wasn't near his best to set him up for Hamilton, for all this money to go on, and there was some good people that flew all around Australia for me to put the money on. I think he started 9 to 4. He should have been long odds on. You know, in today's terms, he should have been $1.30 chance. But you know, what's 9 to 4 these days? Nick, is it $3.40 or?
Yeah, $3.40.
Yeah. I can tell you the way I felt that morning. I was staying at a guy's place because there was a 2-day meeting at Hamilton. We'd had runners on the Tuesday. And on the Wednesday morning, I got up and I went out into his parents'. It was a rose garden, and I was dry reaching everywhere. I was so nervous about it and thinking, this horse gets beat, I'm gone. You know, I'm in a huge amount of trouble. So it's not enjoyable, not enjoyable at all, feeling that way. And I saddled that horse up, and he was a lovely, quite relaxed horse, but my nerves flowed into him, and he was sweating by the time he went into the mounting yard. And there was a really good girl that used to look after him. Sandra Wicking was her name. Gee, she was a good strapper. And unfortunately, I had her in tears. I don't know why, but I must have been, you know, going crook. And the gouch rode him, and I thought, I just can't let him know how much this means. And as I was legging him up onto the horse, without me realising, I said, mate, I'm if this gets beat. And he just looked at me, and he almost went white, and he knew exactly what I was saying. And I thought, oh, what did I say that for? Anyway, he slaughtered it. He absolutely slaughtered it, the gouch. He made 3 runs on it, one up the hill, one down the hill, and then another one in the straight. And he won by a bee's diaphragm. He just
Did you think
won.
you got the photo?
Yeah, no, I knew I'd got the photo. And it was just sheer relief. But I can remember, you know, you hear people say what was the happiest day of your life, and people might say, oh, when, you know, the kids were born, or when I got married, or whatever. But I can tell you that particular day we flew back from Hamilton on the plane, on a 12-seater plane, which we used to do in those days. And just as we were flying, gaining altitude, someone said, geez, I'd like a smoke. You know, it would be good if we could have a smoke. And the pilot looked around and he said, yeah, go for it, boys. You can have a smoke. That's no worries. Oh, good. What about a drink? He said, while I was waiting for you at the races, he said, I went into town. He said, there's an esky at the back. He said, it's full. So I lit up a smoke and took the lid off a VB. And I'd have to say to this day, that was the happiest day of my life. Just fantastic.
Just having the dart and the beer with the weight of the world off your shoulders.
It was just, it was just pure relief.
So how much did you win that day, do you think?
Oh, it was, you know, it probably would have been, I reckon, around 340,000, something like that, yeah. But I know that when I went to, I had to go to obviously get a big loan from the bank. That wasn't going to cover it, but it was all in cash, and I took it in a briefcase down, and they said, well, have you got a cheque here? I said, no, I've got a briefcase here. So we had to go downstairs at the ANZ Bank in Moonee Ponds, I think it was, and count it all out, yeah. So they didn't ask where it came from.
If the photo went the other way, what would have happened?
Sliding doors. I don't actually know. I would have been. Look, I was young enough in that time of my career to get going. I think I'd have got going again, but it would have been a hell of a lot harder.
Must be very hard to have the stomach to do that, though.
So I couldn't do it now.
Yeah.
I could not do it now. And you couldn't do it now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to get on.
Now, from that time on, things really took off. And the next couple of years, you had some wonderful gallopers. In 1992, Jolly Old Mac, who ran 14th on debut and would go on to win the Australian Guineas with Darren Gauci in the saddle, and then the Goodwood with Greg Hall doing the steering. Talk to us about that horse, and it just amazes me that one of the best horses, and maybe the best horse you've ever trained, ran last on debut.
Yeah, well, that wasn't for me, by the way. It was Jolly Old Mac, like a lot of horses I was training during that period, were owned by Ron Cook, and Ron Cook would be better known as a very, very good president of the Hawthorn Football Club, and I think Ron looked after their money the way he looked after his own. He was very tough on a dollar, but he was fortunate enough to make some good money. And he wanted to buy some racehorses. And a fellow by the name of Kevin Mitchell, a great jockey of the past, great money rider, was also what knew Ron because he was a keen Hawthorn supporter, and he advised Ron. He said, now, if you want to buy some horses, he said, there's a guy called George Smith, used to be the manager at Stockwell Stud, where a champion stallion called Showdown used to stand. And Kevin said, George Smith is the best judge of horse flesh you'll ever want to know. He said, if you want to buy horses, you go and see George and get him to select them for you, which he did. He was very smart. And I don't know how many Group 1 winners George would have bought, but there was so many. And I was really lucky to be the recipient of, horses like Jolly Old Mac, Lady Jackie O, and a lot of other really good horses just because of the eye of George Smith.
Tell us about winning the Australian Guineas.
Yeah, well, that was my first Group 1 win. That was 1992. There was only a field of 8, I think, from memory. It was a small field, and the short price favourite was Naturalism. He was ridden by Shane Dye. The Gouch rode our horse. I was advised by a pretty smart punter that our horse had his usual way of racing was to get back and storm home. It had a tremendous finish. But anyway, this guy informed me, said, the way this race is going to be run, he said, you've got absolutely no chance that you're going to come off the heels of Naturalism and run him down. You're not good enough. He said, I suggest you lead. And it took me a while to get my head around it, but I took his advice and we led. And he led all the way, and fortunately in a field of 8, Naturalism was caught 3 deep the whole way. We went down, because he was a great horse, Naturalism, and just beaten in a Japan Cup, wasn't he, yep. Naturalism? And we just beat him home, but he was a very, very good horse, Jolly Old Mac.
Now, you're having a great 90s, everything's going beautifully, and then you decide to pack up and move. You go and spend time overseas and train in Dubai and Singapore. What led to that, and what were those experiences like?
Yeah, Dubai was good. Look, I've got, I probably have a problem where I need to be challenged all the time, and if I'm not being challenged, which, I don't perform as well as I should, which is not a good thing. And I decided to have a rest from it, give it away for a while. I was really sick of it. And then after about 6 months, the well started to go dry. So, but I was able to have 6 months break, and I got my hunger back for it. And there was the job going in Dubai, and won't bore you with all the details, but Les Benton was in charge at the time, and He was instrumental. He and Greg, who'd had a season over there, instrumental in getting me over. And I had 4 years there, which were very good for me because it just opened my mind up. I didn't understand racing overseas at all. I wasn't interested in it, and we didn't take as much, pardon me, as much notice of it in those days as we do now. Obviously, the world's got a lot smaller. But yeah, I was instrumental in being able to get a horse or 2 horses to the World Cup in the first 3 years. And, that was the richest race in the world. And I think the first year I had a horse called State Shinto who ran 4th, and he won 600,000 Australian dollars because the American dollar, the dirham, their currency was tied to the American dollar, and it was 2 to 1 at the time. So, but he did this particular horse, State Shinto, coming to the turn, did look the winner.
Wow.
And, it's just an amazing feeling. But it was just to have a runner, in 3 of those World Cups. The other 2, State Shinto backed up again 2 years later and ran 5th. And I had a horse called Royal Tryst, who Craig Williams actually rode. He couldn't run a mile and a quarter, Royal Tryst, but he ran 5th in the race. So, and they were all, 50 to 100 to 1 chances. So, I thought they performed to their best.
So Dubai was obviously enjoyable and successful. Talk to us about your time in Singapore.
Singapore was no good for me. I didn't stay there long at all and didn't have a runner there. I just, I don't know what it was about Singapore. It was very, very good to other people. I was keen to get there, once again looking for another challenge, but I just didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. There's quite a few Australian trainers gone over there and done extremely well. Unfortunately, it's about to close down, which is unbelievable in itself. But no good, so I came back and started on a new path.
A new path indeed. And not too long down the track, you get a call from arguably the most famous person in Australian racing, Lloyd Williams. He wanted you to be his private trainer. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, he didn't. Look, he had they weren't having a great deal of success at the time, and Danny Nicklick was his stable rider, and Danny was a fan of mine as a trainer, so he spoke to Lloyd and said, this bloke's not doing anything at the moment. He's just got back from overseas, and I think it'd be a good idea to bring him on board. So Lloyd called me, and it wasn't hard to make the decision. I was, it was very attractive financially, but not an easy gig all the same.
How so?
Well, it was just, I suppose, look, I've probably matured a bit in the 14 or 15 years since I worked for Lloyd, but I didn't really. I thought I was the trainer and I wanted to be in charge of that, but Lloyd was very keen to partake in the training of the horses, and I should have accepted that because he was putting the show on. In fact, it was just an unbelievable amount of money that it was costing him per month to have all the horses he had in work. But it went well for a period of time. Those things don't last a long time. He had some terrific horses there, obviously Efficient, who won the Melbourne Cup, but that didn't go under my name. It was it was under the name of Graham Rogerson. So and I did pretty much train the horse, and I feel even to this day I did a really good job with him, which, but having Lloyd's backing wasn't all that difficult. And another couple of horses, Zipping, everybody still remembers Zipping's had that race named after him. And another great old horse, Gallic. Geez, he was a good old horse. But and there are other very good horses. We had a really good, successful period. But the best of that would have definitely been Efficient winning the Derby, and him winning the Melbourne Cup was a really great thrill.
He was an absolute superstar, and you and the team did an amazing job with him. Does it hurt, though, you look back and your name's not on the honour board as a Melbourne Cup winning trainer when effectively you were?
Well, yeah, look, it does. I've got to be honest with you, it does. I would have liked my kids to be able to say, Dad trained the winner of the Melbourne Cup, which I did. Nick Williams told me that he asked for the trainer's trophy from Graham Rogerson, but he wouldn't hand it over, which disappointed me. Didn't surprise me, but it did disappoint me. But yeah, a little knot in the guts about that. But look, you put yourself in that position, and that's just the way things turned out.
Now, we've loved having a chat today, and the final thing I want to talk about is your legacy to racing, because you've got 2 sons, 7 children, 2 of them still involved in racing. Tom Sadler, who was a jockey himself, then went to the jumps and now a trainer.
Yep.
Is it a bit of a relief that he's no longer a jumps jockey in training?
It didn't worry me that much. With Tom, he struggled as an apprentice because of his weight, really struggled, and got into a bit of trouble on a couple of occasions. And he really took to riding over the jumps. He loved the thrill of it, but snapped his leg at Caston and thought there was probably better ways of making a living after that. And he joined me. We were going to be partners, but just because of personal reasons, that didn't work out. So he's gone to Geelong and is training out at Henry Dwyer's property, and he's really making a good fist of it. He struggled badly, or he just had bad horses for the first 6 or 8 months, and they were running around the track, and I thought this will be good for him, and it turned out it was. And now, just of late, he's turning the corner, and he's mad keen. Rides most of his work, giving away the drink, and so he's on the straight and narrow and absolutely flying. So I'm really enjoying Tom's career, as I do all the kids. I mean, we've got Edward, who's well, is just presenter and broadcaster. I think he'd like to do a little bit more calling if he could. Anyway, he may get that opportunity down the track, but he's doing a wonderful job on racing.com. Extremely proud of him, as I am all my other kids. I've got, I think when you talk about legacy, that'll be my legacy, be my 7 children.
Excellent. And you've got a good rapport with 7 kids, which is not easy to do. So you've done well there. And Ed's a great man, and I must give him some credit for helping produce this, because he did give me one of those questions, which may or may not have been the Freedman question. John, we've loved having a chat. Thank you so much, and best of luck going forward.
Good on you, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
John Sadler.